of all of the tech companies that investors could choose from, I think Ilika is one of those that is working at the leading edge of battery deployment, has demonstrated early traction, and is within touching distance of some of the biggest markets and most exciting markets for batteries that are out there.
Hello, you're watching Proactive. Joining me in the studio today is Graeme Purdy, the CEO of Ilika. Graeme, very good to have you in the studio. So 2025, a year of milestones for Ilika, and it looks like 2026 is also shaping up to be a very positive year for the company.
Absolutely. We hit some great milestones across both of our businesses, actually. Maybe we should start with Goliath, shall we?
Yes.
Talk a bit about what we did with our large format batteries. So Goliath, of course, for those investors who don't follow us regularly, is our large format solid state battery, which is designed really for EVs and for consumer appliances. The year started spectacularly well for Goliath because we were able to confirm that some testing of our early prototypes, in fact our 2 amp-hour prototypes, had validated the performance. I'll use that well-worn phrase, does what it says on the tin, but that was true of that prototype, and I think that enhanced our credibility with customers who follow us, because they were able to confirm that our solid-state batteries actually belong in that leading cohort of solid-state batteries. There's probably half a dozen companies and developers that investors follow around the world in this sector, and to be included in that leading cohort alongside some very well-funded, large US companies was really satisfying. And then we went on from there actually to secure some additional grant funding with some great partners, with Jaguar Land Rover actually helping to steer the program, with Professor Paul Shearing at Oxford University, a very well-known figure in the battery sector, giving us advice, and working together with the UK Battery Industrialisation Centre up in Coventry, UK BIC, to do some of the electrode manufacturing, and getting also business advice from a company called HSSMI, who are going to be reviewing the business case for Goliath as part of the work that we're doing on that program.
How important are those partnerships for the progress of programs like Goliath?
Oh, fantastically important. I mean, you just can't do this type of product development in isolation. You really need to be working together with partners who are experts in the field. And I think particularly actually with this program that's currently ongoing, we're getting absolutely top drawer advice.
And does that lead to big cost benefits for the company?
Yeah, it can save reinventing wheels, because if you've got somebody like Paul Shearing who looks across the industry, interacts with lots of different developers, and he's giving you advice on the direction of travel, then you should pay attention to that and make sure that you don't run into any bear traps.
I mean, so apart from the cost benefits, some of the other benefits you're seeing are safety and weight. And you sent us a video earlier last year of some of the safety features and how it compares to other batteries. Take us through that.
Yeah, well, first I should say that, if you have an EV, that vehicle is perfectly safe. In fact, there's some very compelling data actually from the Swedish Civil Response Department that shows that driving an EV reduces your risk of having a vehicle fire 17 times relative to driving a traditional car. But that safety comes at a cost, both in terms of the actual price of manufacturing the vehicle and the weight that you end up with incorporated into the vehicle to provide all of those safety systems. Because lithium-ion cells contain a lot of energy and they need to be managed very carefully. And the big advantage of our type of solid-state cells is that they've got a higher intrinsic safety property relative to lithium-ion cells. So it means they're much less likely to catch fire, and they don't need so many safety systems as a result.
You mentioned beginning of the year with the 2 amp hour battery, Goliath battery. Take us through the progress over the course of the year, because in December you were talking about 10 amp hour ones.
Well, that's absolutely right. And key to that has been the commissioning of our automated assembly line. So we were building that through a lot of 2025. That was brought on stream, and it suddenly unlocked the capability for us to make larger batches of cells. So we followed up that commissioning activity with then making batches of 10 amp hour prototypes, which we were able to release to customers at the end of 2025. So that was a very exciting moment for us.
What are the next steps then? What should we be looking for in 2026 for Goliath?
Well, of course, the thing to look forward to, first of all, is some validation of those 10 amp hour cells. A little bit of feedback. Perhaps we'll get a similarly supportive quote to the one that we got at the beginning of 2025 after people had evaluated our 2 amp hour cells. And then following that, we'll have some discussions with customers to agree our minimum viable product. Now, we've talked in the past about having a 50 amp hour MVP. Whether we really need that or not remains to be seen. It could well be that we can call bank on the 10 amp hour prototypes, because frankly, they're larger than some of the cells that are currently incorporated in vehicles at the moment. So we're in that zone where actually our cells are of the right capacity to unlock some of the benefits when you start to integrate them into modules and packs for EVs.
Let's take a look at your Sterax program, because you had some very exciting news recently, and that is that initial purchase order from Certec, so the start of revenue generation. But taking a step back, how did you progress with Sterax last year?
Well, Sterax was really a sort of a step in advance of Goliath, because we'd already signed that technology transfer agreement with Certec Medical in 2023. And so we were at the tail end of implementing the tech transfer associated with that. We'd sent across equipment to the US, to Certec's facility. They had already installed the equipment. And last year we were doing what's called process qualification. So we were running some of the early batches of product through the different steps, different stages in the process, and making sure that the quality of the product that we were getting at each of these process points was going to be suitable for making a product we could release to customers. So we wrapped all of that up in the course of 2025, and then we were able to start production. And that's what then culminated at the end of the year in us being able to dispatch batteries to a small number of customers, including actually Lura Health, who were kind enough to give us a quote for the press release. And further customers will be getting samples as we go through 2026.
So take us through the latest news about the purchase order and what that takes you forward to.
Yeah, so what that purchase order is really about is it's an indication of the start of ramp up of production of these Stereax M300 batteries. Because the way that the contract was structured was that Ilika retained the responsibility for manufacturing one of the electrodes, the cathode, which is the positive electrode in these little batteries. And we did that because that step in the process is actually one of the most difficult and proprietary steps involved in the manufacture of the M300s. And so we just wanted to ease that tech transfer by retaining the difficult, gnarly bit, taking care of that ourselves, and then making sure that there was a steady supply of electrode for the rest of the battery manufacturing. And so the fact that we've now got an order for some electrodes, in addition to all of the tech transfer deliveries that we've made, because of course in the past we've been sending over electrode for developing and qualifying the process over at Certec. Now we're in that stage where we've said, okay, we can make the product, we've stabilized the process, now we need to start ramping up production volumes.
So is that what's next for Stereax, ramping up production volumes? How's the program going to play out this year?
Yeah, so I guess, there's all sorts of very positive reasons why we chose Cirtec to be our manufacturing partner. And one of them is that actually they've got a complementary technology platform. They do a lot of power management solutions for the OEM medical device manufacturers. And so we're looking forward to being able to integrate our Sterax batteries into one or more of those tech platforms, which then get integrated into full devices. So that's something to look out for. Of course, there'll be ramp up of production volumes and therefore revenue associated with that. And then in addition, what we're also chasing is that we get to the point where one of Cirtec's customers, one of our customers, turns around and says, yeah, we've validated the product for our application. It's a really good fit, and now we're going to launch that regulatory approval for the product and start getting it out to the market.
Graeme, why should investors be excited about Ilika in 2026?
Well, you know, of all of the tech companies that investors could choose from, I think Ilika is one of those that is working at the leading edge of battery deployment, has demonstrated early traction, and is within touching distance of some of the biggest markets and most exciting markets for batteries that are out there.
Well, Graeme, I hope you'll continue to keep us interested in your story. Thank you so much for coming to the studio today.
Thank you.
That's Graeme Purdy, the CEO of Ilika.